to
Thank you.
have you. I'm pumped and I love a good accent. I feel like it adds.
It has accent has its privileges. I think I've got away with a lot of things in the past, I'm sure.
It really adds. It's a nice addition. Well, I'm so happy to have you, Tim. You are
Thank you.
a super impressive individual. I'm not gonna do you justice. I want you to give us an intro and don't be humble because we have so much to learn from you.
It's okay. It's okay. Well, Camille, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on your show. I love all the things that you do, so it's really exciting to cross over a little bit and go into this kind of cool space because I'm always in the nerdy, geeky space, but it's also nice to be in, like doing it in this like visually stunning space that you're in, like the brands and stuff is really cool. But just quick background, you can hear an accent. I was born in Australia, raised in California. My parents are Greek immigrants. I'm kind of from three continents. That's the personal side. But my background, I've worked in the kind of like in the intersection between technology and policy for like the last 20 years. And I can speak both languages. So it means incredibly useful to be that translator or that interpreter between those two very, very different spaces. So any Trekkie fans out there, you know, I speak both Klingon and Federation, so I can go from either side. And what that means is I've worked in government, worked for cities, I've worked at the highest level of technology, whether it's at Google. I also was at the Google Lectures, which is their secret innovation lab, where we will talk a lot about the AI stuff and future stuff that I'm working on right now. And I've also been an entrepreneur. I've created my own companies. I have my own company right now. I've had the last couple of years, and I've been working basically with governments, corporations, and startups trying to help them navigate the world of tomorrow where understanding emerging technologies, but making it very practical. So one thing that I like to do is I'm a moonshot thinker. I've worked on moonshots. I can bring people all the way out to the moon, but that's not fair to like leave them out there. I bring them right back down and say, okay, practically now, what are the next steps? How do we operationalize all these ideas and these dreams so we can get your company either at the front of this technology or not be left behind with the technologies. That's really the focus of my work. And I work on all five continents, actually all six continents, I should say, and really excited to be on this show.
I just feel like I don't even know what can of worms I'm opening here. Like
Go for it.
there's so much to unpack. Like it's so interesting with your background for being in policy and technology. And like at what point did you see I don't know how to ask this question because I feel like it's kind of at like its pinnacle of importance with where it's going in AI and having kind of some governance over, and you know, whether that's at a country level, whether that's like a more like a larger governing body. But when did you start to see that intersection of policy and technology really coming together? Like, was it 20
Yeah,
years
it's
ago?
a really good. No, yeah, it was actually. It's a really good question. It was really, when I was in college was at UCLA, we were trying to basically understand spatial analysis and spatial patterns and stuff. And I was getting a degree in urban regional planning. I have a couple of degrees, but this is important for this topic. And what was really exciting at that time was that we were just learning how to use spatial data and spatial analysis. And it became very clear to me that storytelling, your world, was lacking in the data world because we could splice and dice data and put it all in different pieces, but it became very important that, wow, we can use this storytelling piece to tell pretty compelling stories that 500 pages of text and the best arguments in spreadsheets just won't resonate with people. But a picture, a diagram of these hotspots of where pollution is or where water issues are or where development is or things that people can understand, feel, and
There's
touch
power.
themselves. It was power, and that knowledge of power, it became very clear to me as a student. I was like, wow, if we can democratize access to this technology, where you as Camille as a citizen of a city can access information and say, wait a second, your policies say all this sort of stuff, but I'm seeing you doing all this stuff over here. That doesn't make sense. And now fast forward 20 years later with data centers and more rapid development of data, big, large tech companies basically being able to digest that data and create huge opportunities of visions that we can see, whether they are worldviews or Google Earth, for example. we can now track things, and no one can claim ignorance now because you can actually see, feel, and touch what's going on. Google Maps is the best example. Billions of reams of data behind it in the palm of your hand. And are you driving anymore, or are you just following directions from an app? Like that's how far we've gone now to trusting the data, trusting the process of the data. And it's kind of like a source of truth. And that source of truth is now super important because we can use avatars, ourselves, our voice. We can go from text to voice to image, and I can persuade you to see things that aren't really even real. So those things now are really important for us to understand. It's not just the data, it's not just the storytelling, is what do we do with that? And how do we sway or dissuade people? On the positive side, we can use marketing to educate people and really help people understand the benefits and the value. But on the negative side, we can basically, misinform people, and it's believable, and it changes behavior. And behavior is, it's a big deal right now.
No, and that's such an interesting point. Like over your 20 years, that transition of Google representing that like arbiter of truth and relevance, and like, you're right, like how blindly, but it's interesting. It's like we blindly follow Google Maps, but it's accurate. Like we've gone through, like so many people have all had the same experience that it works, that we trust the technology. But I guess that's further to my question is, how is that dialogue happening today when the tech companies are so far ahead of where governments are, and kind of like I feel like they're not even reading the same book. Like how is that conversation happening?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. So we have always been at this intersection where government lays the framework and lays the rules of the game, basically. And technology companies basically come in and innovate and iterate, and they create markets, and they create those marketplaces, and we see a huge amount of jobs created that we could never even imagine, right? Imagine 20 years ago saying, your job is going to be a social media influencer. It's like, what's that, right? So it's like, there's all, yeah, what? I'm going to get paid to like do 3-second reels on an app that talks about my points and tips and all this stuff. You're like, huh? I want to hear, why wouldn't this be like a 1 hour movie? Oh, we don't do long form anymore. We go short form only, right? We don't do 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second, right? And now it's all about like trending
Now it's
audio
being
linked to
downloaded in your
that.
brain. It's a chip. You don't even have to watch it.
It's already bought. The product's already arrived. It's already 1 hour prime. Like all these things now, we use all these words in our day-to-day vocabulary, and people are like, what the F are you talking about? But none of this would have been possible without government regulation, at least allowing it to happen. And well, we, are coming from Google and from a lot of other technology companies that I represent and help in this space. The fact of the matter is that federal agencies allowed the internet to happen. Federal agencies microtransactions and fin technology to happen. Like these things kind of basically lay the basis, and then the marketplace basically runs on top of that. And so in AI, though, what's a little different is that it's actually going a little faster. And so what's happening is that everything that we've done in the past, we've had about 10, 15, 20 years to really understand and see it. And social media was really the last big boom that kind of caught the government off guard. Like we now have issues, as you know very well, right? Body issues, children, they're too young being exposed to the social media apps. It's not the smartphone that's the problem, it's the social media apps that are causing all of these different concentration issues, etc. Just body dysmorphia, the issues around like, envy and want of all these things that they can't have, etc. And this bullying, all this sort of stuff. These are the symptoms of a market that wasn't really understood. And now we're in that same place with AI, but it's not just AI. So to spin your head a bit more, AI is one of the things that's happening, but there's also blockchain, which is basically a transparency ledger on how we can see, feel, and touch and source things, right? There's robotics, where basically the AI is embedded in a physical machine that can basically sort things in a warehouse or physically become in a human form and basically help us around in our day-to-day life. And then there's energy storage. So basically batteries are getting smarter and more sophisticated, so we can have vehicles go longer in electric vehicles, but we also can put them into robots so they can actually work in factories and actually make stuff. So think of those convergences all happening at the same time. And we've never had a period like this in our life where all these things are happening at the exact same time. It's kind of like that movie where it's everything everywhere all at once, right? It's like, whoa, wait a second, I don't even have the headphones to press that green button. It's like, yeah, what exactly? So I'm feeling this, right? So what I do in my world is that I try and basically do the work for them, distill all that craziness into bite-sized pieces that they can digest in their companies. Because you can see people, I will have CEOs call me saying, I need a safe space literally to ask really dumb questions, but I need to go and speak to my team in the next 3 months and I need you to help me basically like bring this down to the ground for me. Like, what does it actually mean? And my job is to do three things: calm people down, because it's not all going to happen tomorrow; understand where they are in the marketplace so they know where this does this fit; and then three, give them the relevant tools that actually make sense to their journey. So for example, if you're a company saying, we really need an AI chatbot because of X, Y, and Z, why do you need that? Always ask the big question, why? So what is it about it that you need? You want to basically expand a little faster than you have had, so you need to automate some things. Great. Or another option might be like, we're a massive construction company and we've got lots of issues with our inventory. We need to basically have an AI platform. And I say, well, is it the inventory? Is it the source of the materials? What processes do you have in place? It's almost like, to me, AI is the last thing you do. You've got to basically figure out, where does your data live? How have you labeled your data? Is it secure? And what does that security look like? And if you have all of that, then we can talk about AI, because AI needs really good labeled secure data, because what AI does, it finds patterns in that data that you and I could never see because we can't even imagine the scenarios, right? So those are kind of like some practical ways to look at what feels like you're being bombarded by industry. And, media does a great job of like, amping it up and they do a lot of fluff pieces and stuff. But the reality is, for companies, and specifically, it's like, where am I at in this journey and what do I need? And if I need tools, what kind of tools? And is one of them AI? And then what kind of AI? Is it generative AI? Is it machine learning? Is it deep learning? Like, what is it that I need that's going to help me with this process? So I don't know if that
That's
like helped or spun it out a
no,
bit
I know
more.
it. I mean, I feel like I've got 10 more questions every time you talk, and I'm like,
Go for
how
it.
do I write these down fast enough? Um, but what's interesting about what you said, it's a smart way of looking at it, and I think it's a part of kind of the AI problem right now. Is it's such a hot topic of.
Right.
I feel like every conference is talking about it. Every creator is
Oh my
talking
gosh.
about it. It's like, if you don't have AI in your business, what are you doing? But it sounds like your perspective is, well, your business has to be functional, has to have the systems in place in order for it to make sense. Because AI is almost like it's another tool to the toolbox to add into a foundation that will allow it to succeed. But
Right.
I guess my question for you is how do you, like, at what stage is someone ready to consider introducing AI? Because I feel like the conversation, I'm speaking to people that probably have no business of like having AI in their business. Because like there's
Right.
like, do you, right? Like,
It can make things worse. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, it's a great question. The thing is, we are being bombarded by this new technology because it's so new, it's really hard to understand, and it can be anything to anybody. That's the reality check. We've had AI for a long time. This is not new, right? The thing is, it has left the room of the data scientists, who are basically the ones who are not hiding it, but they're the ones who are, often a team somewhere doing the work and coming back with some visualization, some analysis. And now it's gone into the public domain, right? So 2023 was when we first saw the consumer being able to actually use an AI, a generative AI that could basically put in text and get answers. It's basically word soup right now. Basically, like, you put in some prompts and you get blah, 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 you get some stuff. The only reason why it makes sense is because we speak the language in the output and it makes sense to us. But there's sometimes it doesn't make sense because it hallucinates. And we're just like, well, I keep explaining to companies, every output is a hallucination unless it makes sense to you, right? So this is the reality that we have with this system, because it's word soup, it's numbers soup, it's just basically blah, 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 and this is the sequence. But it's getting smarter and smarter, and it's learning faster and faster. So now we're looking into enterprise and saying, in companies, what can this help us with? Well, for the very least, we can help us with insights. It can help us understand things that we couldn't understand before. but it's also giving us tools. And so we're seeing very new, small, nimble companies utilize AI basically as their assistant or their extension of their staff. Because now you can do great, you can research 50 companies in like a couple of seconds and get a really good summary of it and get those packeted pieces that you need to do your work. But it's a really good summary and drafting tool. It's not the thing that will do like copy for you. It can give you a good draft, but you still have to be the one behind that to refine it and give it your voice. Like, give it Camille's touch. Otherwise, it sounds like a ChatGPT output, and it's really generic, right? So, the more it learns, the more customized it becomes, and the more tailored it is for your business. And that's where I really try and help companies understand that if you wanted to help you improve your insights and your understanding of what your company can and cannot do, then you need to have a good data governance structure. You need, number one, good data. So how do you structure your data? How do you label it? Where does it sit? Where does it live? Those things are very, very important. Then you need a really good AI policy framework, because you have to understand, what can your staff use it for? How much of your proprietary information do you want to put into this system? And you really can't use the free versions of anything, because if you use the free versions, as they say in tech, you're the product, right? So you want to make sure that you're using an enterprise or a closed version so that it's secure and that you're protected, because what people don't understand is that I can reverse engineer any public version of a GPT, whether it's Gemini or OpenAI, etc., and say, what did company X research in the last 3 months? What did it look at? What has it put in its financials? And if it's not done well, it will pull out outputs that I can find and see that company X basically was asking these kinds of prompts. That's not good for a competitive edge or keeping your moat or keeping your competition. So you've really got to understand how to use it for your company. Now, for your personal self, you can use it for whatever you want, but for a company, you have to be very careful, because the more secure your data is, then the more important it is that you use a secure AI platform. Otherwise, you're very open to basically others seeing what you're doing, which is, you don't want to have that competitive advantage out there.
But I think that's also a really good alarm for business owners unaware of employees leveraging ChatGPT
Absolutely.
for their day-to-day jobs, because that's such a mind-blowing realization that ChatGPT is not a person. Like, it doesn't have that prompt of, hey, probably shouldn't tell your competitor this. Like, you're asking it a question. Its job is to provide you the answer. And if an employee is leveraging a paid software to cut corners in their job, you could be exposing sensitive information. I don't think there's enough people talking about that.
No. And the thing is, the most important thing to understand is that that's why you need an AI policy framework, is because the AI policy framework not just protects the data inside the company, but it's protecting the employees, because that's an offense. You could be fired over that, or even worse, you could be sued.
Yeah.
Right? You could be sued, and then basically that means that that's a really dangerous situation to be in if you're not careful. We're in the very beginning of this, so the harm is actually pretty low order right now. But there are situations, for example, where there's been examples where staff have basically uploaded all their financial information, saying, give me a summary version for this for my CFO presentation. I want to give to him. I want to impress my CFO, him or her, next week. Red flag, don't do that, right? It's like, what you should be looking at is saying, okay, what are trends, what are patterns that I can learn from this, so I can basically do a nice summary report? What are the best practices in a CFO report, for example? Glean from that and then put in all your information in there. The other thing as well I say is that if you are going to test AI, which every company should be testing some sort of AI in their overall system of processes, because at the very least, everyday AI, which is what we call that operational efficiency, will make things more efficient for you. We'll show those inefficiencies in your processes. But then there's strategic AI, which is basically, what are the new areas of business for me? Where are the new revenue opportunities? How do I create new business models out of my existing knowledge set? That needs to be a proprietary system that's pretty much closed. And for reasons I say is because there's been companies that have used basically open versions of GPT or AI, of generative AI, and they've taken it to their customers. And you've seen a lot of the news about chatbots saying the wrong things. A guy convinced a chatbot to say, yes, you can buy a Chevy for $1, right? So there's always going to be teens and kids and even young adults who are going to like figure out ways to basically scam the chatbot. So you really can't have these systems basically without some controls. That's why these AI policy frameworks, which is primarily what I do right now with companies, basically help them understand how to design these policy frameworks because it protects them, the employee, and their customers. Because once your customers get burnt, Camille, as you know, Camille, right? If you burn your customer on this, it's over. You can take 3 years to build the customer loyalty and lose it in seconds. So this
Totally.
is just not worth. So if you're going to test anything, test it internally, test it on a specific group, test it on a specific area, learn from that, iterate, and then bring it out to the general audience. In Google speak, we say, try fish fooding and dog fooding your product inside the Google sphere. And then once it's ready to go to market and actually, bring it to the general audience.
Everything you're saying is so real. Like there's so many layers and levels to how business owners need to wake up, and it shows you just how fast the world is and how slow. Like so many industries have done okay being slow because they haven't had a reason to wake up and speed up. This exposure point on ChatGPT, even from an internal employee, I don't think this is being talked enough about, and it is so serious. Like schools very quickly adopted policies because of plagiarism. Like I low key wish ChatGPT existed when I was in university. Like I feel like I've been frauded.
But the schools are doing it the wrong way. The schools are doing it the wrong way, though. I've actually spoken to. So I do a lot of work in the ed tech space. They did it the wrong way. So there's 2 groups of schools now, and you're going to see a huge difference with the students' aptitude over the next couple of years. It's actually quite sad. There is a school
learning to be with it
and banning it, right? So the banning it is basically the wrong thing. You can't ban calculators. We just did bigger math problems, right? We got calculators and did more complex math. We brought in word processing, which was banned basically in schools in the early days. We now could create
because it's
more
not going
elaborate.
anywhere.
It's not going anywhere. So rather than banning the stuff in schools, what they should say is, okay, let's change the curriculum so that you use ChatGPT at home to basically summarize and synthesize, but in the classroom now, using your voice, explain what you learned, explain why it was deficient or it was helpful. We're going to have a lot more oral type examination of the person being able to articulate their point of view. So you did the summary in ChatGPT.
Is there.
Exactly. So you did your summary in ChatGPT, but I don't know if you remember this from school days when you're English, you would say there's a book summary and a literature review, right? The book summary is what ChatGPT can do for you, but you do the literature review. So based on all these resources, ChatGPT for students is the best library in the world now because it pulls everything from Google, which was my generation, an actual answer and summary for them in real time. And then from there, you can articulate and argue a point. There's other schools right now saying, we use GPT in all its forms. We also use visualization tools. They're using a lot of the generative AI tools as well, because students have such amazing imaginations. Like, what I wish I had when I was in school was the ability to use like a Sora or something that I can basically put in all my prompts and create this visual imagery and visual video and say, this is what I'm talking about when I say I want this kind of thing, right? Luckily I'm a good drawer. I use to draw cities all the time, but I would love to visualize my city and actually explain like a digital twin. This is what this looks like. And now students can do that. And to me, that's exciting because it's going to take us to the next level of education. It also means that we're democratizing access to education worldwide. You may not need to go to university to do the things other than core curricula, but you can learn so much more outside it as well. So I'm in that camp of use it and utilize it to basically grow. So you're right, it is an issue there, but now in enterprise, in the business space, we're at that exact same inflection point. Companies are banning it, some are using it, some are not using it. Others are using it, frankly, too much, and they're believing everything they're saying, and they're kind of guiding their strategy. I'm like, time out. It's information that you need to basically glean and utilize your own with nuance. That's the goal.
That is such an astute point, because the whole point of institutionalized education is to set you up for the real world. And what I'm seeing as an employer is it's supposed to, right? And as an employer,
it's a create unconscious consumers. But anyway, that's another story.
No, true.
But Rockefeller said, "I don't want thinkers, I want doers." That's our education. But no, it's been turned on its head right now.
I so passionately agree with you. It is completely, I don't even know if it's producing doers. I don't even know. It's producing robots. And I completely agree with you of where the state of education
Yeah.
is. But as an employer, I, and what, as I'm speaking to people every day, the use of ChatGPT is on one hand, I'm like low key fired up about it because I've learned how to leverage it to a point where it almost makes me superhuman. Like it allows me to create work at a rate that I would have never been able to produce when I look at how important time is to me. And then I see people coming in who are employees or clients or just, people. And I'm like, how did you only use a first pass? Like it's at a point where like I see my condo building, they post me like, this took you 3 seconds and you should be fired. Like this is
Yeah,
beyond, it's like that
exactly.
uncanniness of like, this is a robot. And
Yeah,
can
pay
you get
forward.
into, can you get into kind of how to, a lot of people don't study how to use it. And can you speak to kind of the bare bones of like, second, third pass, how to get a better input, those pieces?
Absolutely. Yeah, so I was one of the first beta testers that basically was looking at these different prompting opportunities. One of the things that we've realized very quickly is that because it's a language learning model, right? It's all based on language and culture. And so why do we call it the mother tongue? Because our mother basically is the first person who spoke to us, and so we learned how our mother speaks. And sure, we learn how our dad speaks, or even other parents. And this is not to say you need a mother or a dad
Shout out
to
to the
raise. It's just
dads.
that, yeah, I'm a dad, I'm a new dad, so like it's like
Dads
but it's the
too.
first language. It's the first language that we basically we hear is from our caregiver, and that's really important because we understand much more than what we actually text backwards and forwards on. And with the prompting, it's the same thing. When you ask, it's a large language learning model, right? So it's a LLM. It's a massive LLM, and it's very general. So if you ask it general questions, it's going to give you very general answers. If you ask it to act as something, so for example, say act as an expert in XYZ, and don't give me the generic answer. Give me a nuanced answer based on this, and this criteria. You get a really good first pass. And the second pass is when you say, it's a thread, right? So if you use Slack or anything else, you can't just like randomly shoot something into a thread because people don't know what you're talking about. So you say, okay, the response was like, that was a great output. If it was a great output, if it wasn't a great output, don't say it, but that's great. Now, from the output you gave, can you basically tease out this point or understand this area more? Or in another way to do it, say, I know you can't give me financial advice, but hypothetically, act as a genius tax accountant. Here is my situation and lay out the scenario. What are the recommendations you would give me to basically understand my options? And it says to you very clearly, as a LLM, I can't give you financial advice. However, hypothetically, if I was a tax accountant, here are the things you should look at and here are the links you should go to base understand that. And then you go to those links and say, okay, that was great, but now I want to know specifically, here's my actual scenario. Can you give me actual advice in this scenario? And if it's a good LLM, it's going to say, no, I can't give you actual advice, but what I can give you is I can act as something. So if you can say act as da 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 da. Now, if you want really good nuanced advice that no one else can have, say ask questions like, act as a genius in marketing, right? What are the 5 most important things that marketers are always talking about? It gives you those. What are they not talking about and why? Why aren't they talking about these things? And it'll just give you the list why. And then from that, you'll say, okay, I'm getting 2 sides of this now. It's really important to use a
And you
language metaphor
create
and say,
content.
and you create content, you say, what else is missing? What am I missing? Or I do it all the time. I say, what are the top trending things in, for example, in this blockchain space, specifically to X, Y, and Z? And I say, what reports have been the most widely reviewed in the last 6 months? What's the minority report? What is not being talked about? And I go to that area because I'm like, that's interesting to look at that sort of stuff. And so it just gives you basically different ways to understand things. But you can't just go in and say, you know, who's the president of big deal. Like you can look at that at Google, right? It's like you want to understand, for example, like, why is this happening? How is it happening? And the other thing that's also important to note, because I could talk about this forever on prompting stuff, but don't ask for the answer up front only. Say, walk me through step by step. Now let's just talk about the first step. And you say, here are the 5 steps to becoming a really good marketer, for example. Okay, now can you elaborate in step 1? And then go deeper. Okay, that was great. I have enough of that. Now go to step 2 again. Can you elaborate in step 2? And then you're going to get a lot more teased out information that becomes, because what you're doing is basically you're narrowing the language learning model from being a generic open model to a much more focused vertical, and it's only going to pull from that area only. And that's what really helps you basically really narrow down. And now it's basically like acting as your colleague, in a company that only you two know the information, right? So, but you can't get that from the first prompt. You've got to kind of lead it down into that narrowness.
No, totally. The value, it's interesting. Like the value for ChatGPT is not to do no work. It's to ask the right questions in order to provide a better outcome. So
Very well said.
people don't think about asking, like the value is in asking the smart question. Like anybody can type in, write this report for me. Like spending 10 minutes to type exactly what you said, like breaking it down, going second, third order passes. People don't realize you can speak to ChatGPT like you could a person. And that's actually why I find it the most useful is I find I struggle in getting what I want when I'm communicating to a person. But when I use that same descriptive language, because it's a program, the answer that I get is exactly what my brain was trying to manifest. So people who struggle in communicating to other people can really excel in getting the answer they're looking for by providing that same level of detail, because a human needs more of like an SOP or like the sit down of like the ChatGPT doesn't
We
need
need
that.
context.
It needs
Yeah.
context.
Humans
It
need
needs descriptive
context, right?
words. Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so one thing with humans is that, um, why is AI the best champion in chess in the world? Because the best chess player knows about 90 or 100 different scenarios. The AI knows 30 or 40 million, right? And that's
Yes.
why when you are really good at writing what you're looking for in ChatGPT, in any of the GPTs, and people say, oh, why is it so good at response? Because it's drawing from billions of scenarios and saying, I think this is what Camille's asking me, and I think this is the closest thing to it based on the 3 other 100,000 prompts I've been given in that same order. And it kind of guesses and says, this is more or less right. And you're like, yes, yes, yes. But remember, it's not human. It doesn't understand. It's just basically putting letters and words in sequence that should make sense to you. And what's really valuable, once you are working in the GPT space in detail like you are and like others are as well, is that you can actually then ask it, I'm trying to explain this to a human. Can you actually
Can you help?
explain this out in how I actually would explain this to a person who doesn't have this kind of background? Like, for example, I've done this many times when I'm trying to just a different way of speaking, because as you know, I do a lot of keynote speaking, and it's like really trying to bring it down to the bite-sized piece of book and digest. There's times where even I look at my keynote and say, and I'll put into the prompt and say, this is the general audience. They're an audience of this background with this skill set. They're very smart people, but they don't know this area at all like I do. So are there any words in there that I'm using that are just not relevant to this presentation? You'll be amazed. It's so refreshing. I'm like, wow, I didn't even think of that because I'm so into it. I just don't think, right? That's an issue. The same thing when you're communicating with people. So a lot of managers are using this to basically, how do I give better performance reviews? How do I talk with people about the performance? How do I encourage them if this is X personality? I used to run a team of like 70 people from boomers down to Gen Z, all generations of a very different way of being motivated, of being
Yeah.
counseled, of being spoken with, etc. Some are okay just being, autonomous. Some need daily affirmations. But you wouldn't know that unless you experience that. But if you're a junior person who's just entering a new company and you want to fit in as best as you can, you need a mentor and an AI agent. You need both, right? And so the beauty is that the AI agent's available, the mentor sometimes isn't. And what we're finding in companies now is that when young people who are bringing all the technology, because that's where they've come from, they're fresh out of school or from college, et cetera, and they've got the technology know-how, the veterans in the company who have got the 25 years of nuanced experience, put those two people together and it's a dynamic duo. It's like, whoa, now the company is supercharged. And I try
Literally.
and encourage that a lot in companies because people now realize like, oh my God, I'm going to be like, AI is going to take my job. It's like, no, AI is not going to take your job. Someone using AI is going to
Is
take your
going to
job.
take your job. Yes.
Yeah,
It,
and it's
it,
not going to take your job, really. They're going to take the roles of your job, and your job will become less and less interesting. And what AI does really well is it replaces roles in the job, but not the job itself. And so think of it this way. I'm not going to suggest any age here at all, but people entered the workforce when they used to write with pen and paper, and they used to send things via courier. Then faxes came in, then word processors came in. We stopped typewriting, we started using computers. Then the internet came in, then email came in. People had time to adjust over those periods, but it was a shock
now
to
they
people who were
don't.
not part of that,
Yes.
right? And now it's coming really, really quickly. It's a prerequisite. So that's why I feel like we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay with this. It's just that we do need to utilize these tools, understand them, question them, be very skeptical about them, but be very open about them at the same time and play with them. The best advice I always give people is like play with this stuff at home, see what it can and cannot do for you, and then try and see how it can write out a process for you at work.
No, it literally is personal, professional negligence to not be learning how to use this platform at its best. And
Yeah.
a lot
Yeah.
of people are still in this mindset that it's cheating. It's not when you're using it properly, because it genuinely
Right.
makes you better. Even to your point on the creativity, when I had to sit down and write, TV commercials or social media scripts or a creative brief for a website, the kind of the hindrance of the blank page is a real thing. You kind of
Oh
sit
yeah.
there and you kind of like, bang out a few sentences and they're always crap. And then it's like hour 3 of kind of like courting or maybe like scrolling through social. You're like, I got it. Understanding how to ask it with that much detail. And you've done a really good job of Englishifying this.
Yeah.
Like really, most people don't realize like you should really speak to it like in an insane amount of detail, like exactly what you said. I have a person that's kind of difficult to deal with. They really understand metaphors tied to their dogs. They have a West Highland Terrier that they really love named Cookie. They prefer to vacation in Greece, and I think that if I
Right.
tied, this performance bonus, like, can you help me with a concept?
Yeah.
And that might
What's
sound
a
ridiculous.
bonus? What's a bonus I can use? Yeah.
Yeah, what's a bonus I can use? Like,
Yeah.
what it comes out is way better than what I could have sat down and figured out over 4 hours, and you get it in 35 seconds. And
Right. And
but
because
people
it's
aren't
you're
using
using
it that way.
no, because the thing is, this is the hardest part to say about all this technology is that
Say it.
it's not garbage in, garbage out. It's curiosity or lack of curiosity. If you're curious, you can learn and
The
it will
world is
teach you
yours.
so many different things, right? The world's yours. And you'll always land your feet, because curiosity killed the cat, but did it? It had 9 lives, right? So it's like, you have 9 goes of this before you really say, okay, I'm done with this. But if you lack curiosity, if you lack initiative, if you lack that self-starter approach, it's difficult. It's not impossible, but it's difficult. It's also challenging for the person who is curious and a self-starter and is working in a team environment with people who are not so curious. This is where this really helps. It kind of breaks down those barriers of like, because resentment kicks in. You start thinking, God, I'm doing all the work and they're not. Like, how do we get them to like, pull up their socks, for example? Those things are real. And the way that you can get around those is to really utilize these technologies to really help you communicate and be a better communicator. Ultimately, AI is about bettering humanity as much as all of the FUD that's out there. It's about, we're going to turn to robots and they're going to kill us, etc. It's going to take our job. It's going to take our house. It's going to take our family. It's going to kill us, etc. All that stuff is just nonsense. AI is going to replace things. It's going to also press the buttons on stuff as from a policy perspective that we socially have not dealt with. So we're going to see a lot more issues with children being, developing probably because of the impact of social media. We're going to see a lot of things where people are using AI agents instead of being coaches and referees and guides and assistants. They're going to be using them as, as relationships and partners because we have a huge amount of
Gods.
population that's lonely, right? They're isolated, they're lonely. The positive on that is that we have a lot of elderly people, senior people who are alone. And like, this is the best thing for them to be able to have companionship with it, right?
Yeah.
We have to be very careful not to judge lifestyles and judge people, etc. Because the reality is the world's nuanced. It's a kaleidoscope of different people and use case, etc. And there's going to be places for this to fit in. What we have to be very mindful of is that we are not repeating the same mistakes of the past. We need to be very careful that we do that. And ultimately, for me, I think AI is less about technology and more about humanity. This is a humanity response, and it's language. So if you don't have a tech background, it doesn't matter because this is the revenge of the humanities. If you have a, if you have the gift of the gab, as we say, you're able to speak and to orate and to talk. This is your best friend because you don't even need to type anymore. That millisecond that's lost between brain thought and typing is why we always get that writer's block. But if you put the dictation option on where you can speak into the microphone and just riff with it, it's incredible what it comes out with, right? So, and then over time, if you get like an enterprise model or a model that's much more tailored to you, it learns you over time, and all of a sudden, it's going to speak in Camille's voice, and you're like, "Damn, I didn't know I could speak like that. That's great." So those are the things that I think are going to be very important for us to pay attention to over the next few years. My baby is a couple of months old. She is likely going to have an AI agent as soon as she is able to speak because it'll basically grow with her. And what does that
Wow.
mean for the world where everybody grows up with an AI agent that knows them better than I know them, right? So on the positive, that's an incredible mentor to have all your life and a
Yeah.
guide and a coach, etc.
Yeah.
On the negative, from a marketing perspective, we can now break down a consumer's decision, thought, and decision and purchase point down to a billion little pieces of nuanced nudging, and you wouldn't even know that that wasn't your decision. You were slowly being nudged to purchase something. It's huge, right? It's
It's
massive. Those are two
totally
big
huge.
pieces. Yeah.
Have you read
And
Clara
we're
and the
just
Sun?
starting. Yes, yes, yeah. I
And
mean,
that, I mean,
it's the
it's what you're
same
saying.
situation right there. Right. So it's basically, we could have basically, it's like Her. They just saw the movie Her, more accessible version if you don't want to read the book. It's people utilize it to the point where they started becoming dependent on it. And remember, an AI chatbot or even an AI agent and a personal assistant, but then like an AI friend or a partner, that's always going to give you the non-conflict response. Human relations are all about compromise and conflict and not getting what you want when you want and being misunderstood and being misheard and clarifying. But it's all about the beauty of being in a relationship. It's about that love and that repair, when we have an argument, we get together, we repair it, and we become stronger and better, and we learn more about ourselves. You'll never be able to do that with an AI relationship agent. That's just not going to be possible because, like to your point, you can speak to an agent and get very good feedback on your question, but you have
Yeah.
to really work with that with humans. The same thing, it's always going to give you a conflict-free relationship tool. And then what kind of reality does that give you to how you relate to people around you? Like, imagine we have a situation of isolated teens. Unfortunately, they tend to lean more male, who have also got this perverse view of the world because of, video games and porn. This is the reality of the world and
Yeah.
social
Yeah.
media. Now add an agent in there that is their personified physical form
It's
they've always wanted, and they
dangerous.
always do what they want, right? They always say
Yeah.
what they want. They're going to be able to, how do they relate to people around them? It's going to be very, very challenging. So not to go in that dark space, but from a policy perspective, we have to be aware of the dark areas so we can also bring them into the light areas as well.
No, totally. And it really comes down to like what makes the world interesting is that we don't have control, over all things. But like with
Right.
AI, we are in control, and that's what's really interesting about that future relationship with AI. I also too, to your point on like the curiosity killed the cat. It's that metaphor worked when it didn't work for society to be curious, right? Like that
Exactly.
it's an old
Exactly.
saying. Now lack of
Exactly.
curiosity will kill your career, because if you're not focused on understanding and how to best leverage this, like you're going to be left behind, because we're now at a
Totally.
point where I believe more companies are going to be able to do more with less, and that's going to be the next big thing. Is there's no reason to have crazy fleets of employees and bodies if you can get more done with less. And it comes down to mastering the input level, because to your point, you're not going to be tested or quizzed anymore on your ability to write, because we all have the same access to being able to write quite well, right? So,
Exactly. Yeah, the democratization of access is a blessing. It's a double-edged sword because, I don't need to tell you as a woman in your business, in running a company, etc. It's like there's been a controlled amount of time where mediocrity has been rewarded, and anybody who speaks out or speaks against anything is basically left out. And just getting access to that marketplace, it was designed for a specific demographic of people. We know who they are, and that's how it's been for the longest time. But now, when you democratize things, you don't just level the playing field; you kind of shatter it. It doesn't even exist anymore, right? So you
yeah.
create your own fields as you walk along. And I think the real key here for people to understand is that if you're curious and you have access to democratized data and you have access to democratized information and you have access to being able to utilize it through, Wi-Fi or even your mobile phone, you now can become entrepreneurial. Have helped
Totally.
countries actually around the world to get high-speed internet. And you notice, like, of an example, like there's Galapagos Islands, for example, they had 3G up until like a year ago. Then they got a Starlink contract, and within a year, everybody can access YouTube. What's happening in that society? People are learning. People are learning
Yeah.
English. They're learning entrepreneurial skills. They're creating businesses. They're understanding the world around them. Their curiosity is just amped up. Now
I,
add GPT
I,
to it.
I got something to add to this. It's so interesting what's happening in emerging economies where they're giving those teaching
Yes,
agents that are like AI tablets, and the rate in
totally.
which the school systems are educating and learning compared to the traditional like American school systems, which are so broken and
Right,
outdated. But what's
right.
fascinating to add on to that is I'm seeing these creators follow me from these emerging economies with massive followings, and all of the content is in their language. And you're seeing like, business coaching content or like SEO content and there's it's crazy how fast technology is bringing emerging economies out of the dark. Like they're no longer left
Totally,
behind when they have access to info. It's
totally.
fascinating.
Right, and when you democratize access to information and data, they also start learning just as fast, and
Yes.
they catch up and they take what you've basically created, which has been basically held in Insta or some particular space in an English-speaking context only, and they can use GPT to translate into their language and not just recreate it, they can now basically riff off it and create their version, which goes viral in their communities, and that becomes so viral, it comes back to us in our communities, right? So we've seen it with TikTok a
Yes.
lot. And you see that happening now, and what's happening is that we're getting these nice gellings across all the world, and this is why I love working on all the six continents because I get to see all the different things transfer, the
And
knowledge
the
transfer in one direction.
equalization.
Exactly, but it makes a lot of people who have had the privilege of mediocrity being the rule of the game uncomfortable. But guess what, folks?
And so
It's
it
the
should.
generation of being uncomfortable. It is what it is, right? So a lot of people did not like women entering the workforce in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and a lot of people are not going to be liking the ability that I can actually, we're all going to become gig workers. The future is all gig work, folks. High paid, medium paid, low paid. It's all gig work, right? And if I can get my work done from this place and that place at the quality that I need, why should I deny it from someone from an emerging economy versus a local person here? Like everybody will have access to that. And it creates so much more job opportunity, but it does create more competition, but it creates more refinement. And I think that the difference between competition and refinement is that where now it's a zero sum game versus refinement is like I get to hone my skills and I become more of an artisan. I can be a digital artisan, a physical artisan on Etsy, or it can be a person who speaks and around people in a physical forum. That's the future. Why should a worker be tied to flipping burgers or turning rivets in a warehouse or opening up Amazon packages? Like, why should that be their job? And why are we afraid that that job will be replaced by a robot and AI when that person can be doing something else that's going to be more meaningful to their life? Like, we have this fantasy and we romanticize that, you know, repetitive, dangerous, dirty, drudgery work should be protected, when what we should be doing is providing outlets for these groups who are in these roles to learn
Yes.
new skills so they can actually do things that are much more available to them. Everybody's creative. I'm sorry. I have met people from all over the world, all different backgrounds, all different skill sets. Once they're allowed to be at home with their family, they're creative in the kitchen, they're creative like in the household. There's creativity always. They just have no time because they're so busy doing busy work that it kills their creativity. But I believe firmly that these convergences that we've been talking about, whether it's the convergence of AI, blockchain, robotics, and new energy, is going to allow people to become more creative. And that, whatever that means to them, it may not mean that you can work a regular full-time job. You may have like 9 or 10 gigs, but that so be it. We're in this massive transition of the next 25 years, and this is the very beginning of it, you know?
It's so true. And to add to your point, competition has always existed. Competition is just changing. It's no longer by zip code or postal code. And from my perspective, I would rather have the best people on my team from wherever they exist in the world, who I have to choose from within a 1 mile radius of my office, right?
Right.
And those days are gone, and they should be gone. And I agree with your
Should be
point
gone.
that, the work of drudge, like nobody wants to do it. And you hear this argument a lot in the
No.
United States. It's like, well, nobody wants to do it, so why wouldn't we have, it's like the potential of, it's loss aversion. It's like the potential of being taken from you is
Right.
is scary, opposed to refiguring out where your skills can be better suited. Like if you're not making yourself future proof, that's on you. Because
Totally.
digging
And
ditches isn't the future. Like we don't need that
no,
anymore. We're past
no.
it.
And exactly. Anything that can be done by machine will be done by machine in the future, right? What can't be done by machines is what we're having. We're having conversations, we're learning, we're understanding, we're sharing stuff, etc. That will never be done. And even in these roles that people say, oh, AI is going to automate me out of a job. No, AI is going to automate certain roles in your job. Then what's left of your job? You need to figure out how to fulfill your job in different ways, right? So, but to your point,
No,
Camille, it's on you.
I was just gonna say AI is gonna take you out of your job if you suck. Like it's
Right.
like
And
that.
not that, but somebody else will take you out. Like AI itself won't do it, but somebody else will because they're going to say, look, I can do it better, cheaper, faster, etc. But it's not a race to the bottom. We get confused that it's a race to the bottom. It's not. It's a race to the top. But your top is your top. It's not you've got to earn $50 million to become like famous and so it's no. It's if you're comfortable and you get to wake up when you want to wake up and you get to have a healthy relationship with your family and your partner and you get to see the world if you want to, or you get to like eat the food you want to, that's the new
You
made
could.
it. It's
Yeah,
not a
that's
house and kids and also that's gone. That's gone. And
yes.
the economy is not ready for that. The other point I want to make about technology is in the democratization of technology is that we have a situation where up until recently you can't even pay people in emerging economies because the way that we transact funds is all controlled by the Western world, frankly. And it's been
Yep.
very, very difficult. But bring in Bitcoin, and I can now basically pay someone in Bitcoin and avoid all of that craziness of like the Swift codes and the bit codes and the IBAN and sorry, we don't send to that bank and we transit and they take a huge fee out. All that's going to
Yep.
go. So,
Yep.
and not only
And it
that,
should.
so many people in emerging economies, for example, are priced out. They can't even access like Apple stock or Google stock, etc. But they can access these coins. And to me, that's the beauty of if we give everybody in the world access and we give everybody in the world opportunity, then it's up to the individual to figure this out, right?
It's
And
survival of the
it is what it
fittest. And
is. Well,
well,
not
we've
so about the
also
field because that makes us into Hunger Games, but I want to make sure that we do need social systems and social safety nets. We just don't need them to be so protectionist. And I think one of the challenges we've had with AI, where getting a bit of a bad rap right now, is that a lot of people say this as well, and I'll paraphrase it. It's like I want AI to basically take over all of my drudgery of my life, so I can actually do art and speak and create and do things and see things. I don't want AI to basically take over all the art and creativity, so I have to basically do the drudgery of work, right? We need to flip it on its head. So that's the key there.
I guess I'm using a bit of charged language to wake people up, but to the point on like
I
it
love it.
being more of the meritocracy is that we've allowed the comfort of keeping emerging economies down so that they couldn't
Yeah,
have the same access in order to basically strong arm businesses to have shitty labor. And
totally.
we no longer need to do that. And as a millennial in business, I'm not putting up with a 1 mile radius of shitty, lazy millennial employees that don't really want to work. I would rather work with driven, hardworking individuals from any of the continents and be able to work with them and pay them the way that they deserve to be paid. Like I work with
Totally.
our videographer. We brought her over from Mexico. She's awesome, super talented. We also work with an editor from the Philippines. He's awesome, super talented. Like I'm looking for talent. Like I don't really care where you live, but to your point, I should be able to pay you easily. You should be able to if we're in finance and you're seeing, a trend and you want to, buy into a trend, you should be able to do that. You shouldn't be
Totally.
limited because you live in Vietnam and not Singapore.
Right. Right.
That's where it needs to, it become where we can just like we can work together as a larger community and society than it just being like by bordered walls.
Right, and just think about what happens when you do that, right? So, we've had protectionism for the longest time, and, it's all in the papers right now about, EU tariffs and the US. Now we're going to go into geopolitics, but let me just say that emerging technology is not interested in geopolitics at all, but geopolitics is very interested in emerging technology. And so I'm always
Yep.
at this intersection of the politics and all the stuff. So that's a side thing, right? It's always there. It's one or the other. But what's interesting is that creating these barriers means that we keep the protected society mediocre because they don't have to really think things through.
They
It's
don't
all
have
taken
to.
care of. The generation before mine is so mad now because they have to do all these different things. It's like, but you were given this false sense of reality. My generation was given like this, rude awakening, and your generation and the generation after us is also getting this rude sense of awakening. But the idea that we can hire people who are the smartest and the most driven, the most motivated from anywhere in the world and pay them their living wage of whatever the living wage is, because it's not the same in Zurich versus in, a rural town that's got good access in Indonesia. There's no comparison, but there is a living wage in every place and what makes them comfortable. But think of the flow-on effects when that does it. Like, a lot of people from these emerging economies that I've had the pleasure of working with and collaborating with over the years, the flow-on effects in the community where this first person takes that initiative to try and reach out to someone like me through LinkedIn and then get them access to an opportunity, and that opportunity creates a job and a stable income for their family. Now all of a sudden the community is like, well, how did John or Maria or Petra figure this out? Okay, well, what could I do as well? It's mind-blowing, Camille, when you see that. It's the power of exponentiality, and it's that abundance mindset that's going to set a lot of us
Yes.
free, not the scarcity mindset of the past. That doesn't work anymore. We've passed.
And last point, because I'm so into this chat. My partner has a VA from the Philippines, and honestly, with chat GPT and where we're going with the emerging LLM technology, it's fascinating. Like working with her, we've had her like do like hiring interviews and like sort through applications, and she gets it. What's held her back or what's held back emerging economies in the past is accent or like inability to properly like communicate in the same language, and it was harder to
Culture.
see
It's culture.
instant
Yeah,
culture instantly that they
it's
get
culture.
it. But like by able to working with her through email and her having the tools to be able to in her way get out what she's trying to say and then communicate back into my language, I've never worked with someone better. And it's like for the first time I'm able to actually enjoy the difference between cultures and working together because
Right.
we get it. Like it's not like in North
Right.
America we're only great and every other country is like, subpar, or every other like it's because we haven't been able to communicate in the same way. But now when we have the same book, like we're
Right.
flying.
Totally, totally. And you remember call centers from many years ago when they were outsourcing to the emerging economies, and how angry, like people from like the middle of Canada were like, "Oh, I want to speak to a Canadian." And so it's like,
Yeah.
that's gone now because everybody's trained, everybody is nuanced, they can speak the culture, etc. Most people don't realize that you're speaking to somebody from all over the world, and you have no idea because there might be a bit of an accent here and there, but the culture, the hey, how's it going, Camille? Like, what's happening? Hey, how was the
Yeah,
game
no
last night? Like,
problem.
they know this stuff, right? They're, oh, okay, they're and I've now gone to a situation where there's these generative AI avatar platforms that are not just translating what I'm saying from English to the language of their culture, but it's also to the accent of their culture and the
Ah,
dialect, right?
so
Now,
interesting.
if we're gonna have, so Google Translate revolutionized the world, right? So that was incredible. Now, us having universal, real time, not translation, but interpretation, because translating is word to word. Interpretation is like what's the meaning behind the word.
Ah,
Now I
yeah.
can start saying I can start saying my colloquialisms,
Essence.
and
Yeah.
exactly, and you can basically start saying your colloquialisms, and now I understand. Like versus saying, this room's too small, I couldn't swing a cat. That doesn't translate to French, but the colloquialism that now can be with AI can be translated into French, and they'll laugh, go, "Oh yeah, I get it, right? Yes, it's very small." So that I
That was a
think is
perfect
where we're going
French
to see a lot
laugh.
more of that. Yeah, yeah. It's like, well, they usually go like that. Exactly, exactly. But yeah, I think that's what the exciting part is that we're going to get more nuance, and the beauty about AI is that it knows nuance, and it's going to get better and better and better. And once we get into real time communication, where it's Star Trek basic, universal, interpretation, translating in real time, how many cultural barriers will we break down? It's gonna be huge, absolutely huge. So I'm excited
And how
about
much
that.
you can learn from different cultures, right? Like that's where you can really take it to the next level, because what makes a brand fantastic is building a community and having more data enter into it than just seeing things the same way. So I really there's you've brought sunshine to a really scary conversation that definitely has
Oh,
its fear to it. Instead of ignoring it and trying to pretend that it's not coming, listening to this conversation and understanding kind of the core takeaways of where to go with it, I hope empowers you guys to take your career by the horns and to separate yourself from the rest, because it's now a global economy. If you master ChatGPT, you're not looking for jobs in your community. AI, you're looking for jobs around the world. And like what that means, even with as the wrap up point, schooling, like I think the entire world is changing from AI, and you no longer
right,
have to be
right,
in block jurisdictions to live your entire life. It changes your
right.
mindset, it changes your future, it changes your legacy, it changes everything.
It really does. So well put. It's the great democratizer right now worldwide, and it just means that we become more aware. I'm so hopeful. I'm an optimist, and optimists are not naive. We understand the pessimism. We go through the pessimism because we pick all that up and go, even though we're still optimistic about it. I'm optimistic that as we get more and more democratized access to these AI agents around the world, we're going to start just creating a greater awareness of each other. Frankly, those are the bare minimums we need to deal with these massive poly crises we have around the world. And these are the ultimate moonshot. It's like, how do we work together as people? Because we created these problems. We can solve them together. We just need to want to work together. And I think I'm really excited about that part.
I love that. I mean, Tim, you were a world class speaker. This was such an interesting and fantastic conversation. If people want to book you, find you, or hire you, where do they get in contact with you?
Yeah, so they can go to timpapandreou.com. So it's just
Can you
my
spell
first
that?
name, Tim, and last name. Yep, it's Tim, and last name is spelled Papandreou.com. Or you can find me on the socials. I'm on every platform. You can look at me on LinkedIn. You can get me on Insta and on X, Twitter, whatever you call it now, and anywhere else. But you can find me. I'm very accessible, and I'm happy to help anybody that needs help. And it's because the thing that we do as technologists in this space and futurists is that our job is to basically help and to articulate what's very big and scary and distill it into bite-sized pieces so that everybody can basically figure out how it works best for them. So I'm looking forward to helping anybody who wants to reach out.
That's awesome. And the last question, very quick before you go, we're asking all of our guests, what is a brand to you?
Oh wow, that's a huge question to end it. To end it with, uh, a brand to me is everything that is of value that I align with. And so when I look at a brand and the brand really speaks to my values and understands what I really care about and stand for, I become extremely loyal to that brand. Once it breaks those values, I'm out. I have very little loyalty to the brand. I like the idea that the brand speaks, and the best brands don't say anything or much at all, as you know, right? They speak for themselves. And so to me, that's what I consider the brand. The brand is your voice. It's who you are. It's how you want to be perceived in the world. It's also how you want to be actually understood as well. I think a lot of people confuse brand as the narrative, but it's also how you understood in the world. Where are you in the world, and what does it look, and what's your place in the world? To me, brand is the only way to do.
Tim doesn't date. He's in it for the long haul. He's marriage material brands. You
Very
heard it from
loyal.
him himself.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Tim, for stopping in. We look forward to your future book that you need to start writing after this podcast.
I know.
And,
You told me that last time. I just need an extra pair of hands, maybe six pair of hands. Maybe
or
GPT
maybe
will help me write it.
Yeah. Maybe AI. Well, thank you so much, Tim. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks for stopping in.
Appreciate it. All the best. Thank you. Right. Bye-bye.
Awesome. That was
Bye.
so great.
Yeah.
That was fantastic. So
You're so
we
welcome.
will get. Yeah, that was so. I could talk to you for 3 hours. I have so many questions.
We can do it again.
We'll do it again. What I'm gonna do is, so we'll get you the full one. We do a bunch of clips.
Yeah.
If you want any clips for yourself, let us know, and we'll be happy to get them
Yes.
for you as well.
Would love that.
All I need from you is your bio and your headshot over email,
Okay.
and this will be probably
Okay.
live a few weeks from now. So I'll send to you in a few weeks
Yeah.
for your approval, and then we'll get this baby out.
Awesome. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Camille.
Have a great rest of your
And
day.
I also
Bye,
want to say
Tim.
thank you. Yeah. All the
No,
best.
say yeah.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.